welcome to another episode of Night of the Shield. I'm Jason Smith, aka the Oakland Knight, aka the Blind Jedi, and we got a lot to talk about today. I don't want to rush this. First of all, Happy New Year, Raider Nation. Today is Monday, January 1st, 2024. We had just lost to the Indianapolis Colts 23-20 on the road. After two dominant performances by the Raiders, and the word dominant can be taken several different ways, but we're going to get into a little bit of that. First and foremost, if this is your first time here, welcome. Please think about hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell so you can be updated every time we drop another podcast or video or however you want to call it these days. Kenny's not with me today. Kenny will be coming on next week. Today was an impromptu because it's been a while since I've been on here and recorded any type of content. And we'll get into that here in just a second as well, real briefly. I don't want this to be too long of a show. Obviously, I got a lot of things to do on this wonderful New Year's Day. It's always good to turn the page, start anew. And that's exactly where our Raiders are at right now. It's official, like a referee's whistle. We are completely out of the playoffs. Now, there was a bit of hope. It was exciting. But now we could focus in on the future. And there's going to be a lot we're not going to get into all that today. I mean, that is a long-term conversation. There's a lot of questions that we need answered to so we can move forward and change our perspective of what we're looking for as a fan base for 2024. I mean, first and foremost, we got to get through these donkeys. We got that coming up Saturday. That was announced. So again, let's go ahead and get into the show. Just because it's New Year's and I got to go. Real quick, thank you for your patience. I'm sorry I have not been around. Literally, the day after the Chargers blowout, the Chargers smacking, I unfortunately went under the knife and I had surgery. I've been down and out. I'm still not 100%, but the show must go on. I cannot wait no longer. I had to get back on here, talk to my peeps. We will be going live at some point. I don't have that on the schedule yet of when I'm going to make that happen, but I definitely wanted to make this podcast, this video, and just kind of get my thoughts, where I'm at, what's been going on since I've been gone. Like I said, I mean, I had surgery literally the morning after the Chargers smacking. So I just want to talk about that just real briefly. Everybody's already covered it. It's so much in the past and irrelevant at this point. I get it. But I want to talk about my thoughts on it just to kind of set the stage for what I want to talk about yesterday's performance from the Raiders, and then kind of wrap that up in a bow, and then we can look forward into covering the Broncos so we can get into the offseason. So real quick, what we saw against the Chargers was a complete annihilation of a franchise, of a coaching staff, of a roster for the 2023 season that gave up. It doesn't downplay anything that we did in that game. We broke their will. We implemented our will, and we broke their will. And it made it look as if we had turned the corner and we were a completely different team and we were on a trajectory, which we technically were, because that was followed up. And that's all I really want to say. I don't want to get into much of that. We'll get into it as it goes. But there was a difference between the Chargers game and the Chiefs game. That being that we didn't break the Chiefs' will. Okay? We outplayed the Chiefs. We took it from them. What did Jack Jones say? He told Kelsey to rewatch that game, and we took that game. Fact. We took that game. They didn't give us anything. We took it. But they never gave up. They were never technically out of the game, especially the way that we performed offensively, which can cause us to lose our minds a bit, because you fast forward now to yesterday's game, the Colts game, where we saw our defense do something unorthodox. They gave up the big play downfield. Not once, not twice, but even several times, giving up big plays, allowing the Colts to put themselves in position to keep the lead. Does that mean our defense absolutely fell apart? If you compare it to the last 2 weeks, I suppose so. But I would argue that we've seen that type of performance from this defense this year. And in order to be a more balanced football team, also known as a contender in the National Football League, let alone your division in every game, there's a sense of balance you need, right? We've seen in the past, right? We saw that balance. We broke the will of the Chargers, followed up by a dominant defense performance that really shut Patrick Mahomes down. Shut him down. So our expectations were of such. However, our defense is still human. Our defense are going to have games where they're not going to dominate a situation the way that we did against the Chargers and the Chiefs. And we saw that on display once again. This is where our offense truly needed to step it up. Now, for me, in my opinion, the difference between our offense versus the Chargers and our offense versus the Chiefs was the will of the other side. Now, granted, the Chiefs, high-octane defense, granted. The Chargers defense, as much as they struggle, they not dominated. Their defensive line dominated us in the first meeting earlier in the season. They still had Mac out there. They shut Mac down. They held their own. A lot of different factors play into a team's performance week in and week out. And when you look at this Colts game, yeah, the defense didn't play as well as it had prior in the past 2 weeks, and they didn't go out and dominate the Colts like we were hoping they would, or at a high enough level where they put their will out on the field yesterday. Now, with that said, because I'm really trying not to make this podcast too long, the offense, when you look at the numbers, and numbers can be confusing at times, Aiden O'Connell had a career day. 299 yards, 2 tugs. He had like a 96% passer rating. Davante Adams, well-deserved big game. A lot of people are talking about it. They maybe forced it to Davante a bit too much. Or Aiden did, we should say. But it just wasn't enough. And as good as O'Connell's numbers look, the overall consistency of the offense yesterday was not there. And honestly, the only time that we could truly say that this offense truly performed at a consistent level from start to finish and put up a solid performance was against the Chargers. That's why that game is so key, and I wanted to bring it up even though it's water under the bridge, right? The will of the Chargers were broken, which allowed our offense to play at a rhythm that most teams that are in competitive mode and running on full cylinders themselves are not just going to allow to happen. Most of the snaps against that Charger game was on the Charger side of the field to start the drive, let alone just that defense shut down. The Chargers completely shut down. And I'm not discrediting that game at all, so please do not take it in that way. It is just simply the truth, and it played a lot into how that game played out from beginning to end. That's how we were able to put up 63 points. Hell, I think we could have put up more, honestly. If they wanted to really push the narrative, and we could have broke the NFL record. But yesterday, as well as it looked from a statistic standpoint, I think Zeus had 71 yards rushing. He probably could have hit 100 if they would have put more emphasis on that towards the end. But ultimately, I will state that this offense is still way off mark. And the troubling thing is when you go down our roster, you could talk about Colt Miller not playing, next man up. We've been performing just fine. They did just fine. We could talk about Jacobs the last few weeks being on the sideline, but as we all know, the narrative of Zeus was we're done with Zeus. He is not the guy. But the first time ever in his career when he had the opportunity in a real live action game, be Zeus. And what I mean by be Zeus, meaning to have the game called into his favor, meaning the right progressions, right? Getting the reps, getting into the rhythm of the game. Running backs tend to need that, right? It's not about, and his average was a little low yesterday than it had been in the past week, but nevertheless, like getting those short runs are needed to get a big run to develop. And there was a couple of times yesterday where Zeus was being Zeus, and you saw him with that burst and that power, and you know he's a different kind of back than Jacobs, and it's a great 1-2 punch. Something we had talked about entering into the season, and we were kind of disappointed. But let's be honest, with Jacobs in there and Jacobs running the rock the way that Jacobs runs the rock, they kept feeding the beast and not giving Zeus enough time to get his rhythm going. Now, I think there's some things that have been said through the media, leaked out through the locker room and such that, you know, sharing carries in the future makes sense. And I agree. You bring Jacobs back, you're going to want that opportunity to run both running backs, Jacobs and White, because it makes sense to wear down a team first half, second half, always have a running back fresh, as well as if we sign, which most likely we will sign Jacobs back, especially if AP is the coach, and that's a whole nother conversation in the future. I'm not going to get into that right now. Jacobs will be back, and the longevity of Jacobs and his performance and the way that he produces, I think weighs heavy on who's backing him up and given the same opportunity across the board for both running backs. Now, before I get way too sidetracked, I want to get back to, you know, and talk about an issue that I've seen for the past 8 games, to be honest with you. And we said, you know, that I've been on here and pounding the table and being a big, big voice to say, start the kid. We need to know what our future is. When things started to fall apart early on, when McDaniels was here, all we wanted to see was the kid perform, give him the opportunity to go out throughout the season. And I keep hearing a lot of this. Everybody's afraid just to say the truth of what we're witnessing right now. And I'm not going to shy away from the way I personally feel. This doesn't make it factual because I feel this way and blah, blah, blah. All I'm saying is the kid has had 8 straight games to develop, to perform. And I know a lot of people, I've heard a lot of people talk about his performance, the team's performance in the Chargers game. That's why I wanted to talk about that game and set the precedent that their will was broken. Not a great measuring stick, to be honest. Fast forward to yesterday's game, and to look at his numbers and the way that it developed and came about, we could sit back and we could have the conversation that Aiden has taken some steps forward, and I believe that he has. So first and foremost, please do not think that this is going to be, you know, attack Aiden O'Connell podcast. It's not. It's not. But what I do want to put out there in the universe, and what I do want to say, is that Aiden, which we already knew as a rookie, needed time to grow and to develop, and he still does. In yesterday's game, especially before the second half, he missed a lot of throws. And I'm not talking about reading the coverage, which was part of the things that he was missing, but his accuracy, in my opinion, has not been consistent. Now, when that kid can set his feet and have a quick decision, for example, the last touchdown pass to Davante Adams. He made that decision. He slung that ball. It was accurate, touchdown in tight coverage to Davante Adams. And we've seen that consistently enough that we know what he's capable of doing. We just don't see it on a consistent basis. And in fairness, he's a rookie. He's processing a lot of different things still. He has a whole offseason to develop and take the next step. But here's my asterisk. Here's my issue. And we'll definitely dive deeper into this in the offseason because there's a lot we need to figure out from the quarterback position. But my problem with Aiden O'Connell at this particular time, the dude's a statue. He don't move. He has no sense of urgency or will to run outside of the pocket to make a play. And I'm not sitting here saying that the man can't do it. I won't say that. He just won't at this point. Now, do I believe that he can? I just don't think he has the physicality. That's not part of his game. Could he work on that? 100%. 100%. As somebody who is losing his sight can tell you, when you put your mind to something and you put an emphasis, a focus on one area of your life, you can make differences. You can change. It is possible for Aiden O'Connell to work on his mobility, to understand when to exit the pocket. He could learn and work on throwing the ball on the run. We haven't really seen him do it. We don't know if he even has that trait per se. But his lower half from the waist down, he seems to be real stiff, real heavy. And do you know how easy that makes it for a pass rush? Oftentimes when I watch Crosby or Kuntz, or when it was Chandler Jones or whoever else you want to throw in there, you watch their pass rush, right? And sometimes they take their pass rush deep and wide to try to get around the edge. And sometimes that works. Sometimes it don't. Sometimes that leaves gaps. And we play running quarterbacks that gives them a lane to escape, run, pick up first down, big yardage. Now, Aiden O'Connell's not going to be that dude. Okay. He doesn't have that type of speed or mobility, but he does. I mean, in the National Football League, you have to have enough athleticism, enough oomph to go out and at least get 4 or 5 yards when a play breaks down and you see the pocket collapsing. But when you don't move, when you don't even try to get out of the way, they're pass rushing one spot. They just have to pressure the pocket. He's not moving. There's no fear. There is no worry. So when they load the box up, and the way they've been doing it to us all year, it makes getting to the quarterback not only easier, but that process to be faster. And I see that being a problem. Again, not saying that it cannot be worked on in the offseason for this kid. I'm just saying, as of right now, you don't see that in his game, period. Which leads myself, I'll only speak for myself. I know other people probably see the same thing. But as my perspective is, I feel he can't. Definitely right now, he just doesn't have it or the will to do it. It's a problem. We often talk about what the future quarterback may or may not look like. And I've been on the record to say, since I started this channel, I've never been a fan of the running quarterback. People have brought up, well, look at Tom Brady, look at Peyton Manning. That wasn't their game. It wasn't their game. But I've watched plenty of games of Peyton Manning and Tom Brady to see them do it. Again, they weren't Jalen Hurts, right? They weren't Justin Fields. They didn't take off and run 40 or 50 yards up the field. But depending on the coverage and the breakdown, they could get 4 or 5 yards, which is better than getting sacked. So even though those two quarterbacks that I mentioned are primary pocket passers, they still would leave the pocket to make a play or use their legs to pick up a few yards and not just sit in one spot and get annihilated. So, again, not ruling Aiden out of our future, but from what I've seen, it's a big asterisk. It's a big concern when it pertains to our offense, because you can't sell me that it is Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Hunter Renfrow, Trey Tucker, Zamir White, Josh Jacobs, Abdullah. We have some really solid weapons on this football team. And it doesn't matter how dynamic they are or not compared to some of the other people's weapons around the National Football League. We have the personnel on offense that we should be way better. Now, we could talk about the offensive line. That needs to be addressed too. But again, nothing in the National Football League is guaranteed. We can go out and re-sign some offensive linemen, but they still got to learn to gel together. The system has to fall in place. And again, these are conversations we're going to have as the season ends. There's a lot to talk about, a lot to get into, a lot to figure out, dot the I's, cross the T's, all of that. But as of right now, I promise you, what I see, the biggest holdback for this Raiders offense is the fact that Aiden O'Connell won't leave the pocket. Just can't do it. Shortens his window. Has he improved on reading and making quicker decisions? Yeah. But the pressure that he's under because he won't leave the pocket is messing with his accuracy at this point. And I'm not going to say I have a problem with it because we never expected when Aiden took over and McDaniels was fired that we even were going to have an opportunity for the playoffs. And I'm not even upset that we didn't make the playoffs. Yeah, there's that glimmer of hope get me excited? 100%. But we knew we were already on the trajectory of changing the whole thing around. And now, again, we'll get into that in the future, right? And for the record, because I haven't been around in 3 weeks to state my case about the Charger game and the Chiefs game and what have you, I want AP to be the head coach of this football team, and we'll get into a deeper dive in that later, but that's what I want. And I have some asterisks around that too. There's things that I want to see happen, but there is, I think it's set in stone if you ask me, but I'm going to make a direct video talking about my thoughts about AP, what, when, why, how Champ Kelly's a part of that, and address Mark Davis in my way, whether or not Mark hears my voice or not. But we need to start putting out in the universe what we see and what we feel, because it's what the players feel. But as we look forward to the Denver Broncos, we're going to be facing Stiddy. We know that he's mobile. We saw the difference between Stiddy last year and Carr. The emphasis of Stiddy breaking the pocket. Maybe, and I'll even say that Stiddy did it too much, too often, but at least he did it, and it made a difference. There was a big touchdown pass to Devontae Adams against the Niners when he first came in. Like, things happen when you break the pocket. That's the whole reason you do it. So our offensive struggles, especially since in the last 8 games, and we're talking about 8 games, that's significant. And yes, the excuse still stands. Bo Hardegree has not had enough time in offseason to fully implement a full offensive system. He's using what was already in place and tweaking it week in and week out, designing plays. There was some bad play calling. There was a lot that happened yesterday that hurt this football team. But at the end of the day, these types of games happen, and we still had an opportunity, regardless of how it played out, to win that football game. And I'm not putting it all on Aiden's shoulders because his numbers, once again, they were solid. But could you imagine if he had the ability to break the pocket and run for some first downs and take some of that pressure and edge off everything else on the system and hold the defense responsible in the route running? There's so many different factors that could happen when you have a quarterback that's willing to move. I'm not saying for him, again, to be a running quarterback. I'm saying to be a mobile. That's a big difference. And when you look at today's NFL, defensive end, linebackers primarily, you need that ability. It wasn't so much back in Brady and Peyton's day and even all the way back to Joe Montana and Dan Marino and Troy Aikman, right? It wasn't so much back in their day that they had to be this type of quarterback, but it has become, and we talk about it all the time. Al Davis had struggled with going and changing with the times. I felt John Gruden was the same way in some of his philosophy. And at some point, I think someone mentioned it on a live show, and I'm going to get ready to end this here pretty quick. But I remember on one of the last shows that we did, someone was talking about, hey, man, playing the quarterback position, the best result is being in the pocket, taking your drops, making your read, and throwing the ball. And I do agree with that. But that's not going to be on every single snap. You cannot guarantee that to be the norm every single snap. There's going to be blitzes and stunts and all these things that are going to mess up the pocket, mess up the rhythm of the game, and you need somebody that can improvise when that happens to make a play happen. I watched Baker Mayfield do that, not last week. Saints own them, but the week before against Jacksonville, that guy would not take no for an answer. And he's not known to be a running quarterback, but he was like, you're not sacking me, and I'm going to go get that first down. I'm not even going to slide. I'm going to lower my shoulder. And when you take the identity of an Antonio Pierce Raider football team, we need that no-quit attitude from all 52 players, quarterback included. And that is a conversation that we will get into as the offseason moves on and we really, really break this stuff down position by position, player by player, free agency, draft. There's so much to cover, so much to talk about. But we have one more game we have to get through before that becomes a real conversation. Let's see how the Raiders adjust in this last week. Let's see if Aiden kind of shows us something that we haven't seen from him yet, like breaking the pocket, moving the trajectory of where he launches the football in the backfield, extending plays. Let's see if that opportunity presents itself, and let's see how he does if, in it. We don't know. If I had to be a betting man, which I'm not, I would say it'll be standard quo. You will not see him do such. I don't think we're going to see it personally, but optimistic. I'm not saying he can't do it, so I'd like to see it. I guess that's more where I'm at. Look, the defense struggled. It is what it is, man. This is where our offense has to help out more consistently. The more balanced we find ourselves, the more opportunities we're going to have to win these games. And again, the Steelers won yesterday. There's a lot of things that went against us yesterday anyway, so I'm not going to take this loss and put it on AP because it was a pipe dream to begin with. Every time you find yourself in a situation where even if you won out, there were still other things that had to happen, it wouldn't have been on the Raiders one way or another. They just needed to win out. They didn't. It kind of takes the pressure off. It kind of allows us to sit back, take a deep breath, and be like, okay, cool. That's off the plate. Let's just look for certain things that we want to see, like the way that he gets this. I mean, this team comes out and hands the Broncos a loss at home, in our house again, in the season on a high note. I think that's just going to bode well for the future and solidify the fact that Antonio Pierce needs to be handed the keys and say, continue to take this energy and push it forward, and we'll make the changes necessary to see that possible. And there's some scary things that have to happen before that becomes a reality, and we'll cover that as we move on. But until next time, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button, the notification bell, so you can be updated every time we drop a podcast or go live. Look for us to go live sometime this week and cover some more of the Broncos situation and start really looking at the future and seeing where we're going to end up. There'll probably be a personal solo Antonio Pierce conversation we'll have this week if time prevents itself. Again, I'm still dealing with some medical stuff, but not here to whine, cry, or put my sorrows on anybody else. But I will be live. We'll get back. We'll reconnect. We got a long off season. I'm not going anywhere. I'm sorry I didn't let anybody know. I know that there's some people that contact me personally that know what's going on and some that don't. So I just wanted to put it out there in the universe. Happy New Year. I hope your holidays were wonderful. I hope the new year is set up for you to be successful and happy. And we'll talk about how that can be our future for our Las Vegas Raiders. But until next time, stay Raider strong. Night out.